Hi, this is Martin from Audio Engineering at UCF, and this is the first part of our Ableton instruction podcast series. And this is going to be supplementary to the lessons that we're going to be providing, or specifically myself, are going to be teaching at the studio later in the semester and beyond that, hopefully. And today we're going to be looking at Ableton UI basics. So, why Ableton? So when we were initially choosing a DAW for the studio computer, a digital audio workstation, we sort of sat down and tried to figure out what everyone in the club, I guess, as a coherent group of people would need out of a DAW, and we decided, and we found out that most people, and kind of realized that we had a lot of producers in the club and a lot of people that wanted to learn how to record music, and we came to the conclusion that Ableton can really facilitate a lot of production and especially music composition, as well as recording. So it really can tackle both of those tasks with a lot of ease, and especially unlike Logic and Pro Tools and Cubase, Ableton's UI just puts compositional tools in the forefront of the UI. This is extremely useful for people that are writing music, and of course producing music as well, and things like automations, macros, and plugin user interfaces, and the parameters that control all of that are always present in the foreground of the UI, and it's really easy to configure and manipulate all of this either with automation or with any device. So yeah, the UI is essentially really efficient for composition and production. The workflow is absolutely fantastic. And while the UI is a little bit different from traditional DAWs, it's also very similar. Of course, every single DAW is going to have a mixer, for example. But the way that audio tracks and MIDI clips and stuff like that are very similar to other DAWs, and there's sort of like I guess a bread and butter sort of type of workflow when it comes to that. But Ableton does a few things a little bit differently that really save in time and just enable like a really good workflow. And unlike Pro Tools, it's not designed specifically for recording. And unlike FL Studio, which we found is the functionality is really specialized for in the case of FL Studio. So Ableton is a pretty good middle ground between those two, and I think it's going to provide the best tools for everyone. Okay, so let's start with the general Ableton UI. So what you can see here, and just right off the bat, is there's a mixer, and it'll look something like this when you start a new project. You got just two MIDI channels and two audio channels right here that Ableton just puts there by default. And you have your return tracks here and your master right there. And of course there's some VU meters, and you can expand these up and down like that. And of course your panning controls, turning a track on and off, and soloing. And this is the arm record button for when you eventually want to input some sort of MIDI or record audio. This is what the audio one looks like. It will turn red if you actually have an input device. Whenever you actually put something in these MIDI tracks, some sort of MIDI instrument of any kind, I'll just put massive just to show, normal audio level meter, VU meter, whatever you want to, or no, these aren't VU meters, but they're just the volume meters. It shows up here, and this number here, I'll just quickly play something, I think. Yeah, so just a little saw square wave right there. So you can see here, this is the this highest point right there is the peak, and you can click to reset any of this. And there we go. And that's this box here, adjust the track volume. I don't really adjust the track volume inside the mixer like this. I always use some sort of a utility, or I just use the utility plugin that Ableton has. And yeah, so you have these sends here that go to the return. So if you want to put some reverb on a channel without actually messing with the audio, you want to add some reverb, you just send it. This is essentially what a bus is in like Logic or Pro Tools, I assume. That's what return tracks are. Close out of that. And over here on the left is what I just call the library. I don't know if that's the correct technical term that Ableton uses. But you can click up here for your sounds and drums and instruments, and it's where I come essentially just to put a drum rack. So you can double click, and this will put this drum rack instrument onto a MIDI channel. Unless the audio channel is completely empty, it won't do it. Nope, see, just makes a new one. So you can double click any of this and it'll make a new channel for that. I don't use a lot of these, but for personally, I use other synthesizers and stuff like that. And then of course you got your bread and butter basic audio effects. You got your utility plugin. You can automate gain and like stereo spread and a lot of useful things with this one. You got some other stuff like obviously like EQ8, and double click that, and whatever channel you have selected, it just shows up on down here. And things like other useful stuff like limiters and compressors. Just add whatever you want. And you can see when you do that, this is the drum racks of the instrument will always appear on the far left here. So in other DAWs and Logic, I know for sure, these plugins will just show up with like a name like here right next to the mixer. But in Ableton, each of these plugins shows up at the bottom here. So make sure you have like this enabled so you can see all of them. And they will go from left to right, and each of these actually has a concrete order for the signal. So this limiter will affect the audio signal first, and then the compressor will affect the audio signal, etc., etc. So the order does matter, and you can put as many of those as you want, and you can do some neat stuff with that. So okay, let's move on to. So this is essentially the mixer and / live view. You can see these little boxes here, and you can put like audio clips and MIDI clips inside of them, and you can trigger them. I'm not going to go into that right now for this segment. I'll do some extra videos later after we've covered more Ableton stuff as far as the live functionality goes, because obviously it's Ableton Live, but Ableton is also a perfectly functioning studio recording DAW as well. So to get to the actual part, the more traditional studio setting, you go up here to the right, and you can click on this these horizontal lines here to get to the sequencer, or you can just press tab. It's that easy, and all of a sudden it becomes a lot more familiar for those who use Logic or Pro Tools or Cubase or whatever, more traditional genre, or even Reaper. You can see here that this is every single one of these lanes is just another channel, and these are MIDI channels, and there's still audio channels, and they still correspond to what they are in the mixer. So you can hit tab there and switch back and forth between these. But this is where the actual sequencing gets done. So say, for example, I go into my library here, and this is the Places tab here. This is really useful. You can have a user library of like sort of like clips and whatever you want, or the Ableton packs. And I'll talk about this in a little bit. But you can have, there's also a folder for the current project, so you can view, if you want to drag like an audio sample or something, you can either just drag and drop it from, Finder or Windows Explorer directly onto an audio or MIDI track, depending on what kind of file you're dragging, MIDI to MIDI, audio track to an audio track, and it'll just show up right here. Or you can copy it to the current project folder if you know you're going to be using it in more than one instance, or you just want it something very useful. Easy to access right here, and you can also like add a folder. Right now, the only folder I've added is my samples folder that I put inside the Ableton folder, and this is just right here is just a list of drum and bass loops right here, and you can. This is extremely useful. So you can. These are all separate folders that are just on the hard drive, that are just my sample folders, and you can expand any one of these, and you can sample everything that's inside of them. So if you're looking for one-shots and stuff like that, you can just boom. You can see that all of these, all the samples just instantly start playing once you click them. So it's like, ooh, cool. I like that bass kick. I want to throw that into my drum rack. Then, oh, there you go. I will take just a drum loop that I can show how you can how you use the warp functionality and stuff like that. Oops, no, I don't want to convert it to MIDI. That's another useful feature that I just accidentally showed you. So, but I just want to drag this into here, this audio track. Either just when it slows down, it goes to a lower key. It's just it's the same thing as if you were playing a record and you hit stop and it just go. So if you don't care about keeping the key there, you could just use repitch, and that's technically that's a different pitch than that, obviously. So I keep this. I think this is the best one. There's a few other ones like Beats and Complex Pro. Complex Pro is pretty good, of course, but each one of these has a sort of a different way of processing, shrinking, a waveform, or dragging or stretching it out like that. So yeah, you can obviously manipulate different rhythms in different ways, and just be extremely creative with it. Okay, so you have your audio tracks, of course, and now let's move on to MIDI, which is a little bit more complex than audio tracks, of course, because MIDI essentially needs to be processed through something, or say, for example, like a virtual instrument or a drum rack or just something that plays back sound to actually produce sound, because MIDI in itself is just a MIDI file, and all it has is just as notes, from on this piano scale, and associated velocities and sort of pitch bends and other data that it can be used for playback, but does not inherently make any sound. If you can see here, an empty MIDI track, let me go back to this, doesn't have like a normal levels mixer like this, because it's just data. So if you're playing back MIDI here, it'll just pop up there just being like, oh, okay, there's MIDI data coming in, but obviously you're not making any sound with it because it's just data. But say, for example, you have like a MIDI data for, Beethoven, like anything, like just a piano piece or something like that. And you import it into here and it'll play it back, and then, but it'll play it back, of course, but it won't make any sound because it's just data. So you need to put something into this MIDI channel, some sort of like a virtual instrument, or let's say, for example, a drum rack that will play back sounds corresponding to the MIDI notes. So to create a MIDI clip similar to an audio clip like this, you just select this region, and okay, I guess it has to be an empty one for this option to come up, but you can right-click this region and put insert MIDI clip, say, for example. And you can move this around to any MIDI channel, of course. The shortcut for this is just Control-Shift-M or Command-Shift-M, and you can put another MIDI clip anywhere you want, and you can double-click on this, just similar way to the way you click or just double-click on this, depending on if you have this view open already. You could just click, and you can see here this is just a normal piano roll. Very similar to other DAWs that you can edit, and you can put notes or whatever you want, anything there. So, you just have this note, and I can just copy paste it, whatever. And I can, when I hit play, of course. Whoops. I actually want to go to that region here and drag it here. When I play it, you can see that, oh, see, that was all the MIDI data that I just transmitted, right? So it needs to actually, go there. It needs to be processed through something because it's just data right now. So I don't know, I'll make it a little more obvious. And then, so say, for example, I wanted to put a grand piano. So I want to go to the Ableton pack that I have that has a grand piano right here. Select that, open it. You can just pick any one of these. I'm sure they'll all be great. And I will double click because I have this one selected, or I could have just dragged it here. It does the same thing. And now, since this is loaded in here, you can see now it has a level meter, of course. And when I play it back, ta-da! Turn that off. That's obnoxious. So it actually produces sound. So now I can go in here and essentially edit, put whatever I want, you know, just put my scales, I guess, if you want. Just double click here and can zoom in here on the left, left or right, like click this part, hold it, zoom in up and down like this, click up, down on the mouse, you know, just put some chords. Ta-da, fantastic. So that's how you work with MIDI. Okay, so we are going to move on to Ableton, just characteristics of the plugins that Ableton has. So you can see here that you can go to some of these audio effects and you can double click or just drag onto anything really. Just drag down here and you can add any of these. And Ableton has a pretty similar user interface for pretty much all of their plugins. It's very minimal. It has all the information you need right there. The only thing you'll ever have to expand is just like side or complementary like functions like side chaining for compressors, or if you want to like expand like the EQ right there. But usually all the information is always there, and very easy to see, and there's it's all you need right there. And it always Ableton plugins will always appear down here. Say if I wanted to load in like an external VST or something like that, I can go to my plugins and say, for example, go to FabFilter Pro Q, and this will appear in a window, of course, because this is an external plugin. But all the Ableton ones will appear, you know, just like this, just down here. This is still, of course, down here, but if you need to edit it, you need to click this wrench, and that will open it up right there. And of course, these are all processed left to right, down here on the chain. So when you got these, so now we have these down here essentially, and say for example, you wanted to, let's see, go to audio effects and utility. This is extremely useful plugin called utility. You can just mess with the gain. And going back to what I was talking about earlier, all the parameters that you see right here are just instantly able to manipulate. And you can see when I click on this little like box thing, like outline comes up right here. He's a little like in the corner, and that just essentially means that you can automate all of these these properties and parameters. So say for example I wanted to automate the gain. You know what, I'll copy this, all three of these. You can just select them all, Control C, and you can copy them to anything. So if I wanted to copy them down here, there you go, copied them. So let's say for example, I'm just going to turn these two off. I wanted to automate the gain of this this drum loop. Then all I have to do is click on the gain, and you can see when I actually click on other stuff over here on the right, it changes instantly. So it knows I want the pan selected. So there we go, or the width, or and then back to the gain. So if I wanted to automate the gain, all I would have to do is click on it, and you can see all of these lines are just always here, always there for you to instantly be able to manipulate them. So if I wanted to create like a curve like that just for gain, oops, and there we go, fades in and out like that. If you hold down Alt, you can select like a region between 2 points like that, and you can curve it up and down like that. Really neat. So it's cool like that. And if you wanted to do something cooler, you can say, for example, add in an auto filter, and then you just select the frequency that the filter operates on, and you can go up here. I just set it to the highest value because I want to automate it up for this frequency, and you can see if you look down here, it'll ramp it up. So there you go, really cool effect there. And you can do these for literally any parameter. And if you are using like an external VST or anything, every single one of the parameters that your VST has, so let's open up Replica, for example. The second you click on it, you can control it. So you can see that's kind of like reflecting in real time there. So the second I click on it, then I can just go here and just select, you know, mess with whatever parameter I just set, which was mix. So it's like that. And then you can click on it again, of course, and boom, it's right there. Or you can go to here and, you know, manually select it, whatever plugin you want, and then whatever parameter in that plugin. See, there's a whole list of it if you don't feel like clicking through here and figuring out what is what. So you can create like a really cool delay effect right here that just delays it and then fades out fairly quickly. With relative ease, there you go. Extremely fast and efficient. And the last thing I want to talk about as far as automation goes is these extremely useful macro features that are featured in a lot of Ableton plugins, like say for example this drum rack one down here. You can map these macro settings to any setting that you can find in the plugin. They're a little bit, you just gotta have to click on them and it'll just pop up right there. I know a lot of plugins have this. The more instrument kind, or the instruments for Ableton have all these macro controls. Depending on which one it is. I don't know if this one has it specifically, but the drum rack definitely does, and you can map these to any sort of function or sort of knob or anything on a device really easily. I'll go over how to do that, how devices and Ableton, or like MIDI devices specifically, and Ableton interact in a later video, but I just wanted to show that was there in case people are curious. So yeah, the last thing I just want to go over in this video is just input-output settings, and I guess just the preference tab in general. So for Windows, you go to options and preferences. In OS X, I believe it's file or something else. It's really easy to find, but it's just preferences. You can mess with language and just the look or feel. This is the look and feel. You can there's different kinds of settings here, and of course here's the more important one, which selects your output and input device. This is what I believe that just the default it looks like for OS X. For Windows, I usually set it to ASIO, and then just have it use my audio interface. But if you don't have an audio interface, you just select the correct output device, just whatever your speakers output to. But I usually change the driver type to ASIO. I don't have it currently enabled because I wouldn't be able to have the sound be able to be used in my recording software. But that's usually what I have. And of course, you want a high sample rate, and you can put it higher than 44100. Blah, blah, blah. You can put that higher if you feel like it, but that just ends up costing more CPU, of course, and this is perfectly adequate for lossless audio. And of course, here's the MIDI tab. So if you have any sort of Ableton supported surface, like say for example, like I have a launch pad or something like that, when it connects, you can just select it via here, and then it'll automatically set the input and the output. I don't have mine currently connected, and there's a lot of other options here. If you're on Windows, I would recommend going to the file and folder section, and when you install VST plugins, I would recommend making like a folder under your Ableton folder. The default place for that is just your user. I have this on my external, but or my second hard drive, but it's under your username, documents, Ableton, and then I would recommend putting a VST folder there. Just name it VST or VST plugins or whatever, it doesn't matter. But when you install all your plugins, make sure the actual plugin, the plugin, not the files with it. Let's say for example you have like native instruments, sound libraries. They can install to your program file, but when it actually comes to installing the VST file, make sure it installs to your VST folder, and then what you can do is just use VST custom folder, hit that on, and then just browse to it and set it to the VST folder, and then that will have all your VSTs in one folder. Every single time you open up Ableton, it will recognize all of them. It's really painless to do it that way. I think that's the most efficient way, so I'd recommend doing that. But I think that covers most Ableton UI basics. And yeah, all right. Thanks for watching, and feel free to subscribe to our Facebook group if you are on UCF, or if you go to UCF, of course. And I will be hosting Ableton classes every so often, at least 2 times every single month, and as well, I'll be putting out these podcasts in between those classes, so you can have some sort of reference and video to, I guess, just go back and if in case you missed something. So, and of course, as like a prelude to the topics that we'd be covering in class, but some of the more monotonous things I'd like to cover in a podcast, so you can go back to it and reference it a lot easier. But usually I like to do a more personal lesson, and say, for example, you have like a sort of like a issue with a project or something like that, and you want to make X sound better, or how do I process this, etc., etc. But I'll make sure to focus on all levels of production and Ableton's techniques and stuff like that. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.